Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Arthritis Consumer Experts #CR Arthritis series from the Canadian Rheumatology Association's annual scientific meeting this year in Calgary. And I'm pleased to have as our guest today Nathan Barreth. He's a PHSc Student of Medicine at the University of Calgary. He's an honors undergraduate student in the Cummings School of Medicine's Bachelor of Health Science program, majoring in biomedical sciences. Nathan, great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. I'm happy to be here.
We're always excited to have the next generation of research leaders in Canada, and very pleased that you're able to join us today. We're going to look at a workshop that you're participating in, Nathan, and it's focused on systemic autoimmune rheumatic diseases, commonly known as SARDs, some of the unmet needs in SARDs patients, the impact of SARDs on our healthcare system, and the potential value of biomarkers to help close some of these gaps in related and managing the disease, SARDs diseases in patients. Before we get into your study findings, Nathan, I'm wondering for our audience if you could define, first of all, what diseases fall under SARDs, what diseases specifically you're focusing on, and describe for us what biomarkers are and how they work.
For sure, Kelly. So SARDs are really a collection of chronic inflammatory conditions whereby the body's own immune system is actually attacking its own tissue and organs. Common SARDs people have probably heard of are things like lupus, vasculitis, rheumatoid arthritis, and my project specifically is focused on a SARD called autoimmune inflammatory myopathies, or collectively termed myositis. This is an autoimmune disease where your immune system is actually attacking your striated muscle, and it's systemic. So a bunch of different organ systems are involved. We see there's a bunch of different presentations a myositis patient might have. And one of the biggest challenges that can come in treating the disease is the fact that it's what we would call heterogeneous, meaning there are a bunch of different subsets of myositis that can make it very complicated to manage for a rheumatologist. That's where biomarkers can come into play. So biomarkers, it's a very broad and general term, but it's essentially any substance, so things like proteins, that you can measure for in a patient that can provide you with information about what condition they have and about the state of that condition itself. So that's really what my research is focused on, researching and identifying new biomarkers that can provide rheumatologists with more information about the diseases that they're treating.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Let's dive into your study. And it focuses on a biomarker called sialic acid binding Ig-like lectin 1, which we're going to abbreviate to Sialic-1. Can you explain why Sialic-1 is important for tracking disease activity in myositis?
Certainly. So one of the biggest issues and this is true for any autoimmune disease, but especially myositis, is that in order to effectively treat the disease, you first need to understand how active their disease is, right? Because if you provide a patient with too much or too little immunosuppressive drugs or immunomodulatory drugs, if you tamper down their immune system too much, you make them prone to infection. If you overtreat the disease, that can lead to its own complications. So first understanding how active their disease is really important to prevent further complications. And the current method for measuring disease activity is to measure sort of what we call muscle originating enzymes. So in myositis, when your muscles become inflamed, you're dumping all these enzymes into your circulatory system, things like creatine kinase that are measured by rheumatologists. But your muscles can be inflamed and break down for a lot of reasons. For instance, some patients who are very physically active, who are building up muscle and tearing down old, they're going to have obviously a lot more muscle enzymes in their blood than a patient who's less active. Some patients even will have so much muscle inflammation that their muscles aren't even capable of dispensing these enzymes into their blood at all. So you really need something that's more reliable to measure for in a patient's blood that can give you a more accurate assessment of how active their disease is. And so that's where Sialic 1 comes in. Yeah, Sialic 1 is something we can hope can be measured for in the serum or the plasma of myositis patients. That can be a very efficient method to identify how active a patient's disease is and how much treatment you need to administer to them.
So a great advance in addressing the challenges with diagnosing and monitoring myositis, really exciting. I'm wondering if you could also explain to our audience how Sialic 1 as a biomarker could help patients living with myositis receive better, more personalized treatment. So guiding treatment decisions, predicting flares, things like that.
Great question. So its ability to actually predict disease activity is something we're currently working on assessing. And we're also working on assessing whether or not it is in fact a better biomarker of disease activity than some of these more traditional approaches I mentioned. The idea is that by better understanding the patient's disease, sort of what I've talked about, you can prevent sort of these more adverse complications from occurring if a rheumatologist were to administer an inappropriate amount of some of the different drugs these patients are exposed to with the disease. So helping them live a better life. And we also want to see if maybe Sialic 1 is capable of differentiating some of the myositis subsets I've talked about, because each of those subsets have very different clinical presentation, very different symptoms. And the earlier you can identify that subset, the better for the patient. So we want to see if Sialic 1 is capable of doing that as well.
So looking ahead, as the research evolves and advances on biomarkers like Sialic 1, how do you see this innovation could change the way that SARDs diseases are managed in the future? What can we look forward to?
It's a great question. I think one of the biggest steps that needs to be taken in the treatment of these diseases is that there's really no greater challenge nor greater opportunity for precision medicine when it comes to these diseases. Biomarkers can give you almost an immune fingerprint of your patient. If you can measure for multiple biomarkers in a patient simultaneously in some of the more developed assays or laboratory tests we're seeing be put into place in research and in clinical diagnostics, you can really have a full clinical picture of the disease you're treating, which can best inform you on what evidence-based therapy you should be taking. So I think working towards putting what are called these multiplex assays, these assays or these tests you can run, we are measuring for what we call multiple analytes, or in this case, multiple biomarkers in a single blood test. You're saving time, you're being more efficient, it's very cost effective, and you're really generating a well and thorough understanding of your patient's disease in a way that can prevent hospitalizations and save money for our healthcare system. So I think that's really the next step in biomarker research is, first of all, what kind of biomarkers do we need to be looking for in these diseases? And then how can we combine them in these, multiplex assays to fully grasp that patient's clinical picture?
Thanks so much, Nathan, for that summary, and congratulations again on your research. As I said at the opening, we're always excited to speak to the rising stars in arthritis research in Canada. So really, really happy you were able to join us today, and we look forward to following you and on your career and learning more about the work that you do. So look forward to the next time for us to be able to talk with you. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Kelly. It was great to talk to you as well.
Thanks to our audience. listening or watching this episode. We hope you join us again for another series of episodes from our hashtag CR Arthritis from the CRA annual scientific meeting. Goodbye for now.